We are about to step across the threshold of time, leaving the modern world behind to enter the mist and stone of the 17th century. This journey explores the lost world of Amsterdam during its golden age, a fleeting moment in history when a small city built on mud became the warehouse of the world. We are not merely looking at static images. Using original paintings, maps, and copper engravings made by the very artists who breathed this air, we have reconstructed the past. With modern digital tools, we rebuild these scenes as realistic environments, transforming oil paint into living texture and ink lines into three-dimensional depth. We animate them into motion, generating new angles, intimate close-ups, and perspective shifts that bring the viewer closer than the painter ever could. We have also recreated the ambient soundscape of the time, the lap of dark water against brick, the echo of wooden clogs on cobblestones, the roar of the market, and the tolling of ship bells to deepen the sense of presence. Through these reconstructed sights and sounds, we can experience Amsterdam not as a museum piece, but as a living, breathing organism. Let us begin our journey here, beside the heavy stone foundations of the royal palace. In the 1600s, this canal would have been a vein of steady, rhythmic activity, the lifeblood of a city that lived on the water. It was not the romantic leisure waterway of today, but a working artery. Small cargo boats, low in the water and piled high with peat or beer barrels, moved slowly past, propelled by the muscular rhythm of a single puller. Workers, their backs bent under the weight of sacks, unloaded goods directly onto the streets, while locals walked along the narrow, precarious edges to reach the market. The houses along the water were tall but practical, their red shutters thrown open to let in the air from the canal, which carried the distinct scent of brackish water and wet wood. Standing here, you would have heard the ordinary soundtrack of the age. The hollow knock of wooden holes colliding gently, the quiet, guttural conversations of merchants discussing prices, and the distant rhythmic bell of a nearby tower marking the passage of commercial time. It wasn't dramatic, it was just everyday life in a growing, orderly trading city that was slowly realizing it sat at the center of the world. Let us move now to the beating heart of the Republic, Dam Square in the late 17th century. At this time, the square was not merely a tourist attraction, but the central nervous system of the city. It was a wide, open stage where the drama of Dutch life played out daily. This was the Agora of the North, used for bustling markets, solemn public announcements, and the everyday gathering of a citizenry that prided itself on its liberty. You would have seen traders setting up canvas stalls, selling everything from fresh North Sea herring to exotic spices from the east. Farmers arrived with carts creaking under the weight of cheese and butter, their wheels rumbling over the stones. Residents crossed the square with purpose, on their way to nearby shops or the powerful guild halls that lined the perimeter. Looming over it all stood the royal palace. Though in this era it was not yet a royal residence, but the town hall. It was a massive statement of stone, an eighth wonder of the world to the proud Dutch, symbolizing Amsterdam's growing power and its rejection of kings in favor of civic republicanism. The sounds here were practical and constant, a cacophony of bargaining voices, the rolling of iron-rimmed wagon wheels, and the steady, shuffling movement of thousands of people passing through. It was the functional heart of the city, busy, sometimes chaotic, but ultimately orderly, reflecting the disciplined rhythm of Amsterdam's daily life. Now, let's lower our gaze to the water itself, to one of the hundreds of canals that laced the city like silver thread. In the 1600s, these waterways were the true streets of the city. In an age of mud and poor roads, water was the smoothest path. They were used for transport, storage, and quiet passage between neighborhoods. Small, flat-bottomed boats carried goods from the cavernous warehouses directly to the back doors of shops, while residents walked the narrow brick paths beside the water on their way to work or the weighhouse. The houses lining the canal were practical and uniform, a testament to Dutch Calvinist restraint. They were built tall and narrow to maximize space in a crowded city, their facades leaning slightly forward to allow goods to be hoisted to the upper storage attics without hitting the brickwork. If you stood here, you would hear the gentle, constant movement of water, a calm but essential part of Amsterdam's daily life, a reminder that this was a city reclaimed from the sea, held in place by engineering and will. We drift now to a place of silence and splendor, the golden bend of the Herengracht. By the late 17th century, this curve in the canal had become one of the most prestigious addresses not just in Amsterdam, but in all of Europe. As the city's wealth exploded, the merchant elite sought to separate themselves from the noise and smell of the working harbor. Here, wealthy regents and sugar lords built their large, symmetrical houses. Unlike the narrow structures elsewhere, these were double-wide mansions, miniature palaces of brick and sandstone. Each featured broad windows that caught the northern light and carefully designed facades topped with classical pediments. The canal itself was quieter here than the commercial waterways. It was mostly used by private pleasure yachts and local deliveries of fuel and food. Walking along the Herengracht, you would have seen a different side of the city. Well-kept gardens hidden behind iron gates, clean brick paths scrubbed daily by maids, and a steady but refined flow of residents in black velvet and white ruffs going about their day. It was a calm, orderly corner of the city, known for its prosperity and elegance, a place where the silence cost as much as the stone. Next, we arrive at a building that commanded the oceans, the Oost-Indisch House, or the East India House. In the 17th century, this unassuming brick building served as the headquarters of the Dutch East India Company, the VOC. It was effectively the control room of the first global multinational corporation. Here, in smoke-filled rooms, the Gentlemen 17 met to plan voyages that would take years to complete, to manage a trade empire that stretched from the Cape of Good Hope to Japan, and to oversee the flow of goods arriving from Asia. The courtyard and surrounding streets would have been a hive of activity, buzzing with clerks carrying ledgers, sailors looking for pay, and porters carrying samples of peppercorns, nutmeg, cinnamon, and silk. Though not as loud as the harbor, the area had a steady, intense flow of activity, the quiet, organized movement of an institution running a global trading network. The air here might have carried the faint, expensive scent of spices, a sensory reminder of the distant lands that fed Amsterdam's coffers. It was a place where decisions were made that shaped the fate of nations and the flow of Amsterdam's immense wealth. A short distance away, we arrive at the De Pinto House, a striking residence owned by the prosperous De Pinto family of Portuguese Jewish origin. This residence stood out not just for its size, but for its refined Italianate style, a contrast to the traditional Dutch brickwork. In 17th century Amsterdam, families like the De Pintos were part of a growing, vibrant community of immigrants who found relative freedom in the Dutch Republic. While the rest of Europe often persecuted religious minorities, Amsterdam was pragmatic and tolerant. The city did not have restricted ghettos. Newcomers, including Jewish merchants fleeing the Inquisition, could live in any neighborhood they could afford. Walking past this house, with its creamy white facade glowing in the afternoon sun, you would have seen a comfortable, well-kept home that reflected both the personal success of the De Pinto dynasty and the city's broader openness to different cultures. It was a quiet symbol of Amsterdam's tolerance and opportunity, a place where a refugee could become a tycoon. We now look toward the Blaubrug, or Blue Bridge, spanning the Amstel River as it appeared in 1664. At this time, the bridge was not the stone structure we see today, but a simple, sturdy wooden bridge, known for the distinctive blue paint of its railings that gave it its name. The Amstel here was wide and open, a sharp contrast to the enclosed canals. It was active with traffic, small cargo boats poling upstream, fishing vessels heading out to the Zuiderzee, and passenger barges, the trekschuiten, moving steadily along the water, pulled by horses on the towpath. From the bridge, you would have seen a panoramic mix of the city's edges, warehouses, workshops, and shipyards lining the riverbanks, along with pedestrians crossing between neighborhoods. The scene felt open and practical, a working river at the center of everyday movement through the city. It was a calm but important junction in Amsterdam's expanding waterfront, the gateway to the hinterland that fed the city. Here, we see the Amsterdam Town Hall, as shown in the Stedenbook around 1698. By this time, the building was already considered one of the city's greatest achievements, the crowning jewel of the Golden Age. It was a massive, orderly structure, built on thousands of wooden piles driven into the swampy soil, meant to reflect Amsterdam's stability, civic pride, and Republican virtue. It dwarfed the surrounding medieval buildings, a palace for the people rather than a king. Standing in the square, you would have seen citizens of all classes coming and going, lawyers in robes, merchants with ledgers, commoners coming to pay taxes or settle legal matters in the tribunal. The facade appeared clean and balanced, governed by the laws of classicism, and the open space in front of it was filled with steady foot traffic and carts passing through. It was a clear expression of the city's confidence at the end of the 17th century, a city that believed it had mastered the world. Now we look at the houses along the Herengracht near the old Haarlemmer Sluice around 1670. This part of the canal was known for its well-built merchant homes, tall, evenly spaced facades with wide windows and modest decorative details. This was the backbone of the middle and upper class. The area was quieter than the commercial centers, with residents walking along the canal edges and small boats passing at a slow pace. You might see a maid scrubbing the front steps, a Dutch obsession with cleanliness, or a merchant returning home for his midday meal. Daily life here felt orderly and comfortable, reflecting the steady prosperity of the families who lived in these houses. It was a typical, well-kept stretch of the canal ring during Amsterdam's golden age, representing the domestic stability that underpinned the nation's success. Now we turn to the Oudechans Canal, dominated by the silhouette of the Montelbaanstoren. In the 17th century, this was a recognizable landmark for anyone entering the city by water from the east. Originally built as a defense tower, it had been topped with a decorative spire by Hendrik de Keyser, turning a fortress into a piece of civic art. The canal below was active but not rushed. Small trading boats, fishing vessels offloading their catch, and local barges moved steadily along its length. The Montelbaanstoren stood as both a watch point and a navigation marker, its clock and bell helping regulate the daily life of the harbor district. Along the canal banks were modest houses, workshops for sailmakers and coopers, and warehouses. You would see residents carrying goods, drawing water from pumps, or simply passing through. It was a clear, familiar view of Amsterdam's working waterways, framed by one of its most enduring towers, standing guard over the city's eastern flank. Finally, we arrive at the source of it all, Amsterdam's harbor. This was the engine room of the Golden Age, the driving force behind the city's unimaginable wealth. In the 17th century, this was the busiest maritime hub in Europe, a forest of masts that stretched as far as the eye could see. Here, the massive ships of the VOC, their hulls dark with tar and their sterns gilded with gold, prepared for voyages that would take them to the other side of the world. Smaller lighters ferried goods between the deep draft ships and the shallow quays. Workers moved steadily along the docks, rolling barrels of French wine, bales of Baltic grain, and crates of Chinese porcelain. The air was thick and heavy, filled with the sounds of creaking rigging, the cries of gulls, the rumble of carts on the wooden wharves, and the polyglot shouting of crews from a dozen nations calling out instructions. The smell of tar, salt water, rotting fish, and exotic spices hung over everything. Much of Amsterdam's prosperity began right here, at this chaotic, vibrant, and dangerous water's edge. This was the mouth of the city, consuming the world's riches and sending its influence back out across the waves. That's all for now. Please comment what you'd like to see reconstructed next.